before I start, I just want to say it's a very exciting day for me. I've been kind of going around the world chatting about accessibility in international conferences, and until today, I've sort of been the odd one out, the speaker just speaking about accessibility, while everyone else is speaking on cutting-edge JavaScript and APIs. So for me, it's very exciting to share the stage with Ian today. There's two of us. We've made it. It's getting out there. So yeah, exciting day for me. I'm going to talk briefly about a bit of the process of how we worked on accessibility on ft.com, the website for the Financial Times, and some things that we learned in the process. But before we do that, I want by show of hands, how many of you use something other than Chrome as your primary browser? Something else, in Firefox, something else? Good, about 20% of the audience. So if you went on your favorite browser to Google Earth, this is what you would see. So it's, oh no, Google Earth isn't supported in your browser yet. Try this link in Chrome instead, which is a bit annoying. And kind of, I'm not even going to get into the implications like for the internet of having websites that are made for a single browser. I'm just going to merely scratch the surface here and just say that it's kind of annoying that the thing that you're after, the content that you want to see, is not available on your chosen tool. But in this case, we do have a workaround. You could sort of switch to Chrome, even if it's not your favorite browser, and visit Google Earth on that. And then you would get to the content that you were trying to see in the first place. But what if you didn't have a choice? What if you only had one browser? It wasn't Chrome, it wasn't Firefox, it was some obscure browser that 90% of web developers had never heard of. They don't test in. It was last updated last year, and it costs $1,000 to update. So if you want to get the next version, you have to pay $1,000. And you had to consume all of the web through that one browser. Sounds like just this dystopian parallel universe you'd never want to be stuck in. But the reality is that for millions of disabled users, this is what the web feels like. They have their tool that they access the internet with, and that's it. So sometimes there's no workaround. So for example, if you're deaf, and there's just no other browser that you could switch to when that conference talk that you're trying to watch doesn't have captions. And we see a lot of content providers relying on YouTube auto-generated captions, which is it's a good start. But out of the box, they're terrible, especially if you have an accent, like I do. So this is a talk that I did last year on accessibility, but judging by the captions, I was talking about something horrible that died or something. So they're not exactly great out of the box. So this is just to say, like, we break the web every day, and we certainly did at the Financial Times when we were rebuilding our website. We didn't know much about accessibility. But kind of forgetting to add captions is just one way in which we break the web for millions of people every day. So today I'm going to tell you about other ways in which we have sort of the same effect on millions of people and what you could do about it. So my name is Carvajal. I work at the Financial Times. We've recently moved. We had this great building with a rainbow and everything. We've moved across the river in London. It's another nice building, just very nearby. I was an engineer, started at the Financial Times as an engineer on ft.com, as it kind of was migrating from this old website that got released once a month to a website where we released hundreds of times every day. I joined that team. I worked there for about 2 years. And for the last period of that, I was the lead for the sort of accessibility effort that got us from being a not accessible website to a website sort of accredited to be accessible. But nowadays, I've been there for a few years already. Nowadays, I work in a team called Internal Products, where we build software and tools and automate processes for our staff. So essentially, I spend my day just building stuff for myself and my friends, and someone pays me for that. So it's a pretty sweet gig. So yeah, that's me. And today we're going to talk about, just briefly, accessibility, just kind of go a little bit back and just cover what it is, what are we talking about. Some kind of a bit quick intro into assistive technology, And then I will cover sort of 4 ways in which we tend to break the web, and ways in which we certainly broke ft.com in plenty of our pages before we sort of became accessible. And then just some quick wins, what to do about it. So what is web accessibility? What are we talking about here? There are many definitions out there of what this is, but there's one that I really like because it sort of captures everything. It says web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. That's it. Sort of simple, boils it down to making sure that we're not putting up barriers to access to the very thing that we're building. So we tend to be more familiar with physical barriers or barriers in the physical world, but just like these stairs can be a barrier, there are things that we do on websites that deny users access in a similar way to these stairs. So to understand how this happens, we'll go quickly over how disabilities can be divided into roughly these 4 categories: physical, visual, hearing, and cognitive. So the very broad categories, but for example, someone with a physical disability, a physical disability may alter a person's fine motor function, which may mean instead of using the mouse, use a keyboard, like he was mentioning in his talk, to navigate a website, or you control it with your voice, or typically means using something other than the mouse that we're all kind of mouse or trackpad that we're very used to. So those are sort of input methods, and then output methods. You have things like screen readers, which kind of read out a web page to you, so you sort of can consume it. You can consume it in audio form. You have braille displays, which translate the web into braille, and text-to-speech, which sort of convert pieces of text into audio. And I remember when I kind of first got into accessibility, because I'm an engineer, I wrote JavaScript all day. I'm not an accessibility specialist, so this was all very new for me when I got into it. It sort of felt like I had to be an expert at just so many things. It felt really overwhelming. But you really don't have to be a pro at any of this stuff. Remember all the types of inputs and outputs to get it right. So what I suggest is sort of turn that on its head and just ask yourself these 3 questions to begin with if you're just starting out evaluating your site. So does my site work without a mouse, without visual cues like colors, or without sound? So there's obviously more to accessibility than this, but if you can sort of remember these questions and ask them sort of as you're building your software, you'll be off to a great start. It's pretty solid. So we're going to go over 4 websites that look fine, and we're going to look at some hidden barriers in the code. We're going to find the root cause in the code, and we're going to fix it. So we're going to make an inaccessible website accessible. So you sort of, when you study, you sort of go backwards and forwards until you sort of remember the thing. So we've gone from making a website that's accessible to making it inaccessible. So you make an inaccessible website. Now we're going to try the other way around. So we have a few examples of inaccessible pages, and we're going to try and convert them to be accessible. So this first example is Kayak.com, or Kayak.uk. It's a great looking site, in my opinion. It's great for booking flights, and it sort of has the interactions that you expect from a website like this. So you click where you want to go, type, select with your mouse, when you're leaving, and when you're returning, search, and you get a bunch of results. It's kind of the type of thing that you expect. So, but say I'm flying with my friend Rebecca, and Rebecca, she's an accessibility tester. She works at the Digital Accessibility Center in the UK. It's a non-profit provider of accessibility services, and they audit ft.com every year. So we work very closely with them. And Rebecca primarily uses a keyboard to navigate the web. She doesn't use a mouse. So she has kindly recorded a video for us to explain sort of kind of doing the same thing that I just did with my mouse. With my mouse, she would do it navigating with a keyboard. So let's see how that goes. Let's see if we have audio. Let's see. What am I doing?
Now we're going to try and tab through the Kayak.co.uk website. This is done by pressing the tab key And I would then be expecting highlighting to appear on the items that I focus on. But highlighting is only appearing on the form fields, and that's because they open up when my focus is in them. The rest of the items on the page, there is no focus, meaning I'm not going to know my focus on them, meaning I won't then be able to select them.
So it turns out that it's nearly impossible to book a flight with this website if you're using only a keyboard, because as you tap through the elements, you don't know where you are. And some of you may be suspecting sort of why this is happening if you paid attention to your previous talk. So we're going to look a little bit at the code here. So I sort of inspected this site in Chrome and found where I found that thing at the top, that horrible thing. So there are a couple of things that I don't agree with in this CSS, but kind of the main one is that one at the top, that outline none, which removes the outline of everything on that form. I can imagine, because I've been in places like this, and this was us at the Financial Times, you would get someone kind of with the best of intentions saying, can you get rid of that thing, because it's ugly, there's no malice there. The person kind of saying this typically doesn't know that that's kind of very useful for someone navigating the web in a different way. It just looks ugly, that blue ring, just take it away. So I would imagine that that's what happened when Kayak, the team at Kayak were developing this site. So I tweaked the code a little bit in DevTools, and I put that back. So I got rid of that outline none. So you're tabbing through, you see these as you saw before, because as you interact with them, but then you see the blue ring. I'm tabbing through the page like Rebecca navigates, and you know exactly where you are at all times. So you just removed one line of CSS, and the entire thing becomes usable again. So the key takeaway here is that just like the cursor, the cursor is crucial to someone navigating with point and click, so like a trackpad or a mouse. The focus ring is crucial to anyone navigating with a keyboard. So to put this in another way, you know that feeling when you're sort of hooking up to a projector and you're sort of looking for your mouse, you don't know where it went. And Apple has actually built in a feature where it magnifies it 100 times. So if you shake it fast enough, it actually magnifies, and it doesn't record somehow on the GIF, but it makes your pointer nearly as big as the screen. So it's like, here you are. So is that feeling of not knowing where you are on the screen? It's just very unsettling. So now imagine that feeling every day on half of the websites that you visited. So just like you wouldn't design a site in a way that hides the pointer because it's ugly, never hide the focus ring. The focus ring is a lot of people's cursor. So you don't take the cursor away, don't take the focus ring away. The good news here is that we get this for free. So we get this out of the box with browsers. So if you do nothing, literally, you get that, like your site is usable out of the box, like Ian was mentioning before. But depending on your design needs, you may want to just spice things up a little bit in terms of design. So I wrote this talk back when Pokemon Go came out. So it was all like in terms of evolution. So your base focus ring is that blue one that comes out of the box with the browser, but you can evolve that into something a little bit more complex, especially if your site is something like what we had. So we had it to ft.com, and this is what they told us to hide. Like, that looks ugly, take it away. It kind of does. So, and also you could see that if you had just left it the way it was, there's not a lot of contrast in some of our background tiles. So blue over blue didn't really work too well, because it has to have kind of higher contrast for you to be able to see it wherever you are. So we worked with our design team who kind of create the color palette for the entire ft.com, and they gave us a color that would have high enough contrast with all the backgrounds, because they know all the possible combinations of colors that we have on there. So they gave us that beautiful blue, cyan, that color, and that worked out, and you could see it. So you're sort of evolving your sort of basic blue style into something a little bit more advanced, depending on your design needs. And if you want to go to like sort of the next iteration, that kind of final evolution is, and this was sort of new at the time, this has been around for a while already, is using focus visible. And you can read a little bit more about it on the README page. It's a polyfill for the pseudo selector coming in CSS4. I don't know if this is, I haven't done CSS in about a year. I don't know if this has landed or no, I don't think so, but if it hasn't, you can use the polyfill, and then when it comes out, you can just get rid of your polyfill as it goes, and then you don't have to change your code, and then you have sort of this kind of more advanced iteration. And so what does this do? Remember when I mentioned that some people in our team would say, sort of product owners would say, get rid of that blue thing, we don't like it. So we said, fine. For people, so what this does is, if you're interacting with your mouse and you're clicking on things, you won't see the focus ring. But if you're tabbing through, you will see it. So it's kind of that, ideal world, ideal solution that we sort of wanted. So this is an example. Here I'm clicking, I think. No, I'm tabbing through and I see it. But if I click, I don't see it. So tabbing through, but if you click, you don't see it. So this made everyone happy. Oh, and this was implemented by Arjun and Jake from sort of the origami team and the FT.com team. Yeah, they did a really great job, and it's been live for about a year on FT.com. So you can try this on FT.com, and it should work. So like I was mentioning before, focus visible is actually in the CSS4 spec. So this is really coming. If it's not here yet, it's about to be. But again, this is if you have kind of specific needs on your website that sort of make it need to be this complex. If your needs, the needs on your website are simpler, or you don't have a stakeholder saying get rid of this thing, you can use just the default, and it goes a long way. So the second example I want to show you is the Independent. It's another beautiful website, in my opinion. And I'm going to, with my mouse, I'm going to try and sort of interact with the page and subscribe. So I have several subscription options. I'm going to try to subscribe to the best one, so the one that they recommend. So I can click through, but then when I go to weekend, I say, oh wait, that's the best offer. I'm going to go for that. I can find out more if I click on there, and if I click on that, I get access, and I can pay, and I can subscribe. It's kind of pretty standard kind of subscription process to a publication. So Rebecca, again, kindly recorded a video for us of kind of doing that same interaction, but with a keyboard, and trying to find that same subscription, kind of trying to get that best price that I got.
I am now going to try and subscribe to a weekend subscription for the Independent newspaper. I will do this by trying to tab the page and trying to tab onto the weekend tab. I'm now pressing the tab key, and as you can see, highlighting is appearing on the links at the top of the page. And I've completely skipped over all of the tabs, so I can, even though I'm in personal, I can't then tab onto personal, weekend and gift to change this, and be able to then be able to sign up for a weekend subscription because I can't tab onto it.
So it can seem simple. Oh, there's something broken in the HTML, but essentially by making this kind of omission on your site, you're essentially discriminating against a very large group of people. You're saying you don't get access to this offer. Only people who use a mouse get access to this offer, which is pretty serious. And from the business side, you're essentially blocking a whole bunch of people from subscribing to kind of longer value subscriptions. So it's kind of like it's just bad all over. And again, kind of these are typically decisions that just aren't made with malice. It's just not knowing kind of the effects that they can have. So let's see. Oh, so let's see. I think I did something similar. No, wait. Spoiler. So yes, this is supposed to animate what's going on. There you go. So tabbing through. So if we do the same thing that we did sort of in the previous case, you sort of see where you are, you tab through. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So kind of the key takeaway here is, you can test your site with a mouse. It works great, but always before you release, ideally, long before you release, as part of your development process, test it without a mouse. Try and navigate with the keyboard to see if you've missed anything. So let's see. Right. So in this case, we're trying to find out why we can't get to the weekend tab, because we could get to the radio buttons and down and then back again, but we could never move right. So you can probably guess there. We have a bit of Angular, I think, in there. Nothing against Angular, it just kind of pops up in accessibility talks. And you can see that as they built, whoever built this, there was some thought of accessibility, because you can see the role tab there at the right, which is kind of some semantics, kind of additional semantics to say this thing is a tab. So someone was kind of thinking along the right lines here. But what we've done is it's essentially to the browser, since the browser doesn't know any Angular, the browser interprets this as, okay, so this is a link that goes nowhere because it doesn't have an href. So it's just, why bother putting focus on it if it doesn't go anywhere? So that's why it doesn't land on it. So you have, I think we have another one. Right, so if you're tabbing through, you don't get to the find out more button either. And this could be a whole talk on its own. Why is that button a link and why is the other button a button? Should a button be a button? Should it be a link? But anyway, this is kind of the same case. You have a link that doesn't have an href, so the browser doesn't bother landing on it. So one obvious solution would be just add an href to your link. But kind of given that you have your Angular logic in there, and if you can't add the href, because href would automatically give you focus. But if you can't do that, you can do, let's see. Okay, the GIFs aren't playing nicely with me. Okay, yes, there we go. So you sort of go in there, edit to this kind of just in DevTools, and give it a tab index of 0. As Ian was mentioning before, that inserts it into the tab order. So you're sort of forcing the browser to put focus on this element. It's like, okay, browser, I know you think this doesn't do anything, but trust me, you have to put focus on this. That's the equivalent of doing tab index of 0, and then the browser just, okay, you can tab through those elements. So you add that to any element where, for whatever reason, you weren't able to keep the original semantics of HTML, and you have to sort of mimic them in this way. So you add tab index 0 to force that focus on that element. So I often get asked, once we had our engineers kind of getting into this and getting excited about making things better. So it's like, oh, wait, Laura, so what should have focus? Should I just put tab index 0 on everything, just trying to make things better? So should everything be focusable? And that's kind of going a little bit too far. So I typically compare that to, so when you have to make that decision, kind of think about kind of a gaming console or something that you're controlling remotely with remote control. So for example, here, this is kind of my Nintendo Switch. Let's say you were controlling that from remotely with your remote. You would expect, as you point to it, to be able to sort of land on the games and on the actions below, and maybe up there to change the users. But you wouldn't expect to be able to land on the Wi-Fi signal or on the battery, because there's no actions to be done there. So the takeaway with this one is just make sure that the items that you're supposed to action, that the user is supposed to interact with, that they have the focus ring, but anything else doesn't need to have a focus ring. Sounds a bit obvious, but this was a very common question that we had in our development team. So third example out of the 4 is another website that I use perhaps way too much. So say I have a problem with my Kindle and I need support. So a quick glance at this page, just look at it and say, oh, that's where I need to go. The support, so kind of visually you know where the support for your device would be. And we're going to look at the code for this website in a second. But kind of the action that you would take is kind of go to device support, click, and you get your support. Just one action. So if we look at kind of a simplified version of the HTML of that page, you sort of would expect the hello, what can we help you with, to be like an H1, because it looks like the main thing that happens on that page, and it is an H1. Without looking at the code, I would expect your orders, returns, refunds, and all those blue ones to be H2s. They look like the second level heading, but they're also links. So the developers in this case decided to make them links, which looks okay, looks right. They are literally links. And kind of below the fold there's another H1 that says kind of browser help topics. It's a smaller, we don't see on the screen, but it's a smaller title, but somehow it got made an H1. Doesn't make a difference, looks nice. And then learn how to, there's kind of other level headings down there. So it's H1, then it jumps to H3, but it looks fine. The page looks fine. You were able to get to where you wanted to go. So, oh, what is he? Hold on. So I want to show you another quick video. This time, Mike from the Digital Accessibility Center recorded a video for us of him trying to navigate this page and get device support for his Kindle in the same way that I did. But Mike uses a screen reader to navigate the web. So he's going to sort of try and do the same thing I did, but with a screen reader.
So I've got a problem with my Kindle, and I've been advised to go to device support. And I've found a couple of issues with trying to access device support. So if I bring up the headings on this page.
Amazon.com help. Heading list dialog. Headings list view. Hello, what can we help you with? :1, 1 of 3. Browse help topics: :1. Learn how to ... 3.
So we've got two issues here. The first one is that we've got duplicated headings at level 1, and then the headings move to a level 3. So ideally, we would need only one instance of a level 1. So
hello, what can we help you with? :1.
Hello, what can we help you with? And then subsections would ideally be given a level 2 markup. So if I go to the level 1 heading.
Hello, what can we help you with? Heading level 1.
So this is the first heading in the page. So if I press down arrow.
Separator, blank, link your orders. List of 2 bullet track packages. Bullet editor, cancel orders. List and link returns and refunds.
Returns.
List of 2 items. Bullet return or exchange items. Bullet print return mailing labels.
And
list and link device support.
Device support. So if that was a heading, that would be easier for me to identify. Screen reader users will generally navigate by headings first. So normally we would skim through the headings of the page before we look at the links.
So if you've never kind of seen the interaction between a screen reader and a website before, now you get a bit of a glimpse onto that. So it's kind of very different how we interact with the mouse and visually than you do with a screen reader. So things that are obvious to us, like you look at the page, it's like, well, the link's right there. I can see it, I can click, and then I move on. I get to what I wanted to get. You can see like all the steps that Mike had to go through to do that same thing. And we could have shortened that sequence a whole lot if we had made those subheadings H2s or something similar. So takeaway here is the headings on your page are your hierarchy. You should be able to, without looking at the kind of graphical representation of your website, look at your headings and understand what the page is about. It's just the heading structure. So, okay, the H1, that's what my page is about, never having sort of 2 of them. So only one H1, that tells you what the page is about. If you have 2 blocks of something on your page, there's typically a theme to your page, if your page sort of makes sense. So there's the H1 should be, what the page is about. And then doing it sequentially, so H2 under the H1, H3 under the H2, like not skipping, because there are people who kind of depend on this structure. This is their representation of your website. So if we mess it up, it's like, they can't see the website anymore. So, and again, something that sounds obvious, if it looks like a heading, if it introduces a section, and it's directly related to the thing on top of it, it's probably a heading. So you should give it an H tag. But the opposite is also true. And this is something that we did at ft.com a lot before we sort of went accessible, is that we had H tags everywhere. We had in a footer, because something needed to be small and bold, we made it like an H6, because that, you get some free styles, and it's kind of, you can move faster. Oh, H6, that looks like I want it to look, move on. But by doing that, we really are messing up the structure that someone that's consuming the site with a screen reader is trying to interpret. So don't use H tags for styling, please. And finally, a fourth example, I want to go back to the beginning of the talk where I mentioned video and captions. So one of my colleagues, his name is Ben Fletcher, he put a video together for my talk, kindly. He's a principal engineer at the Financial Times, like myself. He works on the FT.com team. And besides sort of building, just writing code like I do, and building features like machine learning algorithms, and curate, hundreds of thousands of news feeds on the website, he's also a software engineer that writes code most of the day, like the rest of us. So I want to let him tell you about, from his perspective, the importance of captions on the content.
Hello, I'm Ben. I'm deafblind. Let's see. Here is a web page and there's a video, but it has no captions. I don't understand any of it. Let's try another video. It has captions, but the text is too small. Another video. It has captions and good-sized subtitles, but it's almost transparent. Poor contrast with the video gives me a headache trying to read. Finally, here's a video with all these things addressed. But there are mistakes in the captions. It's frustrating. Sometimes my work colleagues would applaud after watching a great talk, and I would just copy their applause, even though I couldn't follow the video.
Captions aren't optional. They're absolutely essential to, if you're distributing any kind of audio-visual content. And it's very common that you may not have a budget to hire a pro captioning service to do this for you. But like the Autocaptions that we mentioned at the beginning, even though they're a bit awkward, sort of out of the box, it takes very little effort to tweak them. So things like YouTube will generate them automatically for you with to the right timings on the video, and then you just can go in and correct any mistakes that it made. And then just by spending 5 minutes in just tweaking the right words, adding the right punctuation, it makes a world of difference. It turns text that doesn't make any sense into the actual content that you're distributing. So just to wrap up, I want to leave you with some takeaways. The focus tiles on the page are the equivalent of the mouse cursor to someone navigating with a keyboard, so don't take them away. Think if you ever have to tweak them or take them away or make them less visible, would you do that to your cursor? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. Your browser defaults will go a long way, so if there's no time to do anything to them or no need to do anything to them, just kind of let the browser do its thing. It'll work out most of the time. Always test your site without a mouse. If you don't have a huge budget to do testing with all kind of these kinds of accessibility tools, like screen readers, etc., like the ones that we showed before, at least test without a mouse. If it works without the keyboard, you can get to everything with the keyboard. You've gone a really long way with little effort. And again, the headings of your page represent your page structure, so make sure that you can sort of scan through them and the page makes sense. And again, captions aren't optional, so sort of next time you publish a video on YouTube or any kind of content on the web, I encourage you to kind of pause 2 seconds and think, would I publish this thing without its audio track? If the answer is no, then please add some captions before you publish it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and now I think we can go there, and you can take this nearest seat,
Yes.
and we'll ask you some questions.
Cool.
Thanks for your talk. Can we do end-to-end testing with puppeteers or WebDriver with use of case?
So let's see, how do we do testing of this in ft.com? We do use Puppeteer, but yes, there's definitely kind of tons of automation, like automated ways to do this and to test this. So in ft.com, we go kind of through kind of several phases. We use a tool called Pally. It's an open source tool that you can sort of use manually in your terminal, or you can hook up to your CI process. That once you sort of you can configure it so that if you push code to your branch, it will sort of kind of display your page and check all of your HTML to make sure that you haven't introduced any new accessibility issues. There's a caveat to this. This covers it's debatable. It doesn't cover everything, but it covers just some basic stuff that just should be on the page. So if there's kind of any glaring mistakes, this will catch it for you. And you can sort of make it part of your development process. So you don't even have to think about it once it's there. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay. Suppose we have a totally inaccessible website. What can you advise to make it accessible just step by step, part by part, but every part make good? Or just firstly make some basic things, but for all website?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's when you're faced with this, especially if you have a big website like we had ft.com, and it just wasn't accessible. It looked very nice and was brand new, but it just wasn't accessible. So what we chose to do, and I don't think there's a right answer to this, but what we chose to do and worked for us was to approach kind of the second option that you're mentioning. Kind of create a baseline, kind of a very low baseline to begin with. So hooking up Pally to our process and making sure, like once we did that, it catches the kind of glaring errors that I mentioned. Each one of our apps, so ft.com is made up of hundreds of smaller node apps and microservices. So kind of all the kind of front-end apps, like hundreds of errors in them. So sort of using kind of some of these automation tools that can help you, so you don't have to remember all of these things that you need to fix, and then sort of get to that baseline. That's still pretty low. You can have a website that gets to that baseline, and it's still not accessible, or there are key things that someone without a mouse won't be able to access. But it's a start, and you can solve a lot of kind of major problems with it. And it just boosts the morale of the team. Like they can get to that point where they're feeling, well, we're doing a good job here. What else can I do? How much more can I improve this? And then sort of from there, you can have sort of, if you have the budget for it, you can have a third party audit your site for you, like we do at ft.com. But you don't need that to sort of improve from that baseline. You can get some free accessibility tools yourself. Kind of teach yourself and some of the people in your team to use them, and in the same way that you test your code before you merge it to master or you deploy it, it's just another way to test. You can sort of manually test some things and they become evident immediately. And even without those tools, just testing with your keyboard and things that we mentioned. So it's things that you can do for free, things that you can incorporate in your process, and you don't need any permission from anyone to do them or any budget. If you have budget, great, then you can buy some great things. But yeah, it's doable on a shoestring budget or no budget. But I definitely recommend sort of establishing that baseline for everything and then sort of building up from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Semantics is not about looks. Principle, if it looks like a heading, then it's a heading. This principle can lead to troubles. Do you agree with that or not?
That principles can lead to trouble. But yeah, principles, rules, I don't like to follow rules very much. Well, no, it's sort of debatable there as well. There's definitely no reason to just, okay, there's this rule, things need to be a heading, I'm just going to follow that without asking any questions. That's sort of not the point. It's sort of thinking, like putting yourself in the shoes of someone who has to consume your site only by the headings. So what do you do then? If you have to make your site understandable only by looking at the headings, what will you do? That's it, really. There's no sort of following rules that make no sense. It's just like, if I look at these headings, am I getting the message that I'm trying to put out there? That's really all you need.
Judging by your examples and in your experience, the most common platform for blind people is Windows and Internet Explorer. How do you think, why can this be so?
It's a good question. I'm not an authority on this, and I don't have like the stats off the top of my head. In the case of Rebecca and Mike, they're accessibility testers, so they there's a team of about a dozen people where they work, and they specialize in a particular tool in a particular environment. So you will have another tester who tests on a screen reader, but they test on Mac. So that, they're a company that tests websites, so they test on all this variety of devices, on systems, on browsers. So I would say it's not a fair representation. That's I kind of say, if most people who use a screen reader are on Windows. At least not judging, don't judge just from my examples. But it is true that one of the most popular screen readers, at least kind of when I was working on this a couple of years ago, was a kind of Windows-based tool that does cost about $1,000, unbelievably. There are open source versions, but this one is just very popular, and people just have it in their machines. So if you're used to navigating the web with a tool that works for you, like in any field, change is a bit of a challenge. So if you've had that tool, even though new open source tools have come out for all the platforms, there are people who are still using them on Windows, which is, you have to support them. But yeah, I don't think I'm the right person to say, yes, people who use screen readers are mostly on Windows. Yeah, I don't have the authority to say that.
Okay.
Thank you. Please choose the best question.
The best question. Oh my God, I've forgotten everything already. I remember the last one. Why does the best, does someone get a prize at the end if they ask the best questions? Wait, can you see them? You have them there.
You can choose between end-to-end testing, between step-by-step and...
That, yes. So yeah,
okay.
if you take anything away, okay, so I'm going to go home, I'm going to go back to work, and I don't know if my site's accessible. What should I do? You can put the bar very low to begin with. So yeah, start with a baseline for everything and then build up from there. Yes, that
Okay,
one.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.